Salam. I wanted to just say a welcome to this discussion as we've been witnessing that this is a window to the world. This Congress has been a window, and I want to invite you to look at the window of this discussion on the troubles of my home country, Lebanon. I don't know if you have been watching the news and are curious to turn on the international news on Lebanon, but I can tell you that I have just recently returned from Lebanon. In Lebanon today, the overall mood is of rage and despair. The recent economic and political crisis is leaving the Lebanese people with immeasurable consequences. Global experts are having a hard time measuring and estimating how severe this crisis is. This crisis is getting worse by the minute, and still zero reform has been undertaken by the ruling government. Lebanon is mainly an importer country. The extreme depletion of its currency value is wreaking havoc on its purchasing power, leaving pharmacies, bakeries, supermarket shelves empty, and lacking the very necessities for people, and especially children, to survive. The inflation rate of more than 100% is causing a severe decline in the Lebanese lira's purchasing power. The country has the highest trade deficit right now in the world. The minimum income was already low at $400 per person. It has fallen now to less than $40 per person. The Lebanese government has not invested in any resources or any form of productive investment to help remedy this hyperinflation. People's deposits are trapped and hijacked in banks, forcing the Lebanese people to withdraw their funds at an extremely depreciated rate, reducing the market value of their assets to 65 up to 75% or more. Nearly 50% of the Lebanese people are living below poverty line now. People are growing more hopeless and desperate, which is leading to more rage and self-inflicted crimes, domestic crimes, theft, and overall chaos. In May 2018, Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, addressed the United Nations on the Convention Against Corruption. He said, "Corruption cripples economic development, stifles entrepreneurship, and deters investment. Corruption robs schools, hospitals, infrastructures, and other vital services. Corruption undermines recovery, breeding frustration and fostering more corruption when average people see no other way to achieve their goals other than become desperate." We are here today to bring awareness to the condition in Lebanon and invite you to look at the humanitarian side of this, not the political side. Please, if we can all, by the means available to us, use our local influence, our pens, our voices to raise awareness and of the suffering in Lebanon. Surely we can convince our policymakers in the US as well as the international community to see how their current policies are sanctioning corruption. Let us tell them about the women and children of Lebanon and why they are dying. Women and children are homeless after a devastating explosion. Corruption will not allow for a fair investigation and will never shed light and hold anyone accountable. Why? Let's get our politicians to ask why no one will be held responsible, why the corruption is so deep that investigations go nowhere. I invite you to listen to stories from local small businesses after the explosion and what it did to their well-being. Talking about the refugee problem in Lebanon, it's the refugee situations in Lebanon. The refugees in camps in Lebanon are in horrendous conditions, and yet they rather stay there than go back home. Their home regime is so destructive that it's not safe for return. They would rather live in campus in Lebanon and then go back home. Please have your policymaker look into this. What is the benefit to any party or to any country if the refugee stays in a country where they are not treated well, or they are a burden and they don't have the minimum security or safety or guarantee of a fair life and fair education and fair social status? The refugees are hurting, and so are the Lebanese people because of the country's unstable condition. There should be international discussions to bring about their safe returns to homelands and allow them to rebuild and relive and relieve the strains on the other countries they're in. And preparing for this discussion today was challenging because while filming throughout in Lebanon, when I was in Lebanon preparing for this film, the subjects we were examining were impacting us constantly. The hours-long lines for gas, the despair and anger in people's faces, and the overall mood in the country is definitely grim. Please watch this short documentary and keep in mind conditions have worsened since. The credits for this video, I would just want to share this before we see the video. The credits go for Shaza Zwaini, a talented and well-deserving recent graduate of the Faculty of Fine Arts of Lebanese University. Shaza, like many of her young people graduating and cannot find jobs, her and her colleague Muhammad Gabris helped me put this video together. Please give your full attention to the video, Lebanon, a country in crisis. Put your questions in the chat afterwards, prefacing the question with a question in capital so we can see it and we do not miss your questions. And we will direct those questions to our panelists after the fact. So we're going to go ahead and play this video now and come back.
August 4, 2020. A devastating explosion rattled the streets of Beirut. Killing 217, wounding 7,000, leaving 150 with debilitating disabilities, and displacing over 300,000 people from their homes.
كمحل كان جوزي هون أنا كنت بالبيت بس يعني كل شيء هيدا اللي بتشوفيه كان كله بالأرض من كل شيء بضاعة من كل شيء إزاز برادات كل شيء ما في شيء.
According to the World Bank, the explosion caused an estimated 3.8 to 4.6 billion in substantial damages.
أنا يعني لو ضليت بالمحل كنت متت لأنه كل شيء هبط بالمحل. هاي الطاولة اللي بقعد عليها مع الكرسي كانوا هون يعني كانوا إجوا علي وقت اللي كله اللي حواليك عم تشوفيهم ازاز فيترين ولا شيء المراية اللي وراك هي الكبيرة ولا شيء البضاعة راحت.
It has been 2 years since the crisis has escalated and shattered daily lives of the Lebanese people. Yet, the government failed to implement structural and effective policies and resolutions to ease the situation. So what is happening in Lebanon? Most medications and baby milk are no longer available in pharmacies as the economic crisis continues to intensify. The economic collapse shrunk the currency to 1/10 of its one-time value, making the Lebanese lira lose more than 85% of its worth.
الدولار عم بيطلع بتفوت على السوبر ماركت تشتري غرضين بتاع 200,000 يعني غلا مش طبيعي. فواكه ما فيك تجيبها على البيت. أقل كيلو كنا ندفع 4-5,000 الكيلو هلا صار 25-30,000 الكيلو. ولتمشي ربطة الخبز صارت 5,000 كانت 1,005. يعني كله عم يطلع. اللحمة ما بقى نجيبها على البيت 150,000 الكيلو أو 200,000. يعني العالم مش بس أنا عم بحكي إنه هيك عم يصير فينا العالم كلها هيك.
The lira now trades for more than 16K compared to the exchange rate 2 years ago, 1,500. The hyperinflation occurring in the market drove more than 50% of the Lebanese to be below the poverty line as they can no longer afford essential commodities. Lebanon heads for a blackout as electricity reserves deplete, prohibiting the government from buying fuel for power stations. This has led the people to rely on generators and candles.
هلا كلهم عم يبكوا قصة المطار. كلهم عم يبكوا بيجوا بالدور تراس كيف بدك تدفعي المطار؟ مليون بده على 5 أمبير. يعني إذا بدي أطلب أنا للأي سي بصير 10 بدهم مليونين. نحن ما عم نطلعهم. حالي بالويل يعني حالي بالويل. قد ما نحن عم نجرب نشد حالنا بنرجع نلاقي شيء رجعنا لورا.
The Lebanon fuel crisis is at an all-time low. Lines now stretch for miles at gas stations as vehicles wait for hours in exchange for minimal amounts of ration fuel they are allowed at a time. In addition to the social unrest, The pre-existing economic burden resulted from the Syrian refugee crisis got deepened along with the new escalations. With over 1.5 million refugees, the Lebanese government fails to accommodate the Lebanese and the Syrians.
هن عم بياخدوا من قدامنا كل شيء لانه الامم المتحده عم تدفع لهم بالدولار لهم فريش ماني لهم دولار يعني خلص يقتنعوا بالهيدا اذا بتشوفي نهار اللي يجي كميون الجيش ليعطينا كرتونه او شيء يطبوا السوريين وياخذوا يعني كان اكثر وجود السوري اكثر منا نحن.
An estimated 1/3 of Syrian families do not have official refugee status, therefore undocumented, leaving their children vulnerable to exclusion from education and other services. Child labor and early marriage represent further threats to their well-being, putting both women and children at risk, all while the refugee camps are continuously growing, and those children are the next generation on our streets. This significant population increase has had an overwhelming effect on the country's already weak infrastructure and economy. New solutions need to be found, or else chaos will continue its reign. We now plead for help. Without international interference and aid, nothing will change. No one will be held accountable, and our beautiful country will perish.
Alone, I can do nothing. Together, we can irreversibly advance the frontiers of peace, dignity, justice for all mankind.
Corruption cleansing. We urge the United States to join other nations in demanding an end to corruption in Lebanon by enforcing steps according to the UN Convention Against Corruption. Beirut blast investigation. We urge civil society and organizations to join the Human Rights Watch, calling an UN Human Rights Council to investigate the Beirut blast as well as demanding for accountability. Safe return of the refugees. Syrians should be aided by the international community in returning safely to their homeland, allowing Lebanon to deal with its ever-growing national crisis.
I don't know if everybody was having a hard time listening at the end. The sound wasn't perfect, but I'm gonna go ahead and move with the panel, introduce Ms. Shireen Jirdi and Ms. Hala Kilani, that they join us from Lebanon today. After this video, this devastating video, like I said, while we are filming, it was impacting us by the day, the devastation and the worsening of the situation. I would like to hear more from my sisters in Lebanon. Ms. Shireen Jirdi, she's a WILPF Lebanon member, as well as a WILPF International Board, Middle East and North Africa, MENA regional representative. In March 2018, Shireen joined the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict as the MENA Regional Liaison Officer. She has extensive work with the Women, Peace and Security as a regional consultant, as well as her work on disarmament. She has been active with the Permanent Peace Movement on disarmament issues, and she is currently team leader of WILPF Lebanon on the Banning Killer Robots campaign. I'm gonna also welcome Ms. Hala Kilani, and then we can turn it into the statements and questions. Also, Hala Kilani. Hala joined the climate movement in 2016 and has been serving as a senior communication officer with the International Secretariat of the Climate Action Network. She has been working with the network since then, while pursuing various activities with several other organizations to support advancements on human and women's rights, including WILPF Lebanon. She has a master's in anthropology from the University College London. We like to welcome Shireen and Hala to join us again in WILPF US events. And thank you for being with us, offering your expertise and hopefully projecting some valuable directions for us today. I don't know if we have any questions. I'm going to look at that, but I'm going to leave it with Shireen for a small statement. Shireen, go ahead.
Thank you first, Nada, and thank you, WILPF USA, for organizing this Congress. That was amazing. I was only able to attend yesterday due to time difference. But definitely, this is an excellent opportunity for all of us WILPFers to be connected within this horizontal platform through these spaces. I cannot help it. Like once it is about the explosion, I'm now trying to get myself back. We live every day, the 4th of August. It's a daily suffering, whether like you were impacted by the explosion, whether you were injured, whether you had some of your relatives killed, like got injured. When we say injured with this explosion, we're talking about more than 200 people who were killed and more than 5,000 who were injured. And when we talk about injury with the glass, it means we either lost a hand, lost eyes, or lost our feet, or like had a major physical disability. This is all something that we live with on a daily basis. I would like maybe at this point to thank Nada for this comprehensive documentary that was very clear. And I would like to stress it a bit further to say the impact that Lebanon throughout the years, and this is to say the peace processes and the end of war does not mean that we have peace. It's a process that we had in terms of the inability of political parties who are actually militiamen, and the image or like under umbrellas of political parties who were unable through 30 years to bring institutions into actions, to bring a state building into actions. And that's why like now when we talk about corruption with the lack of state building, then it means we're having this state of human insecurity. In Lebanon, as Nada was stressing, we have now aggregated indicators of human insecurity at all levels in terms of food security. Even the WHO is worried that more than around 70% of children go to bed without dinner. According to certain research center at the AUB, it is said that for people to be able to have food for their families, they need almost the amount of like 2 or 3 people working in that family. And this is like it's very hard to have a working 3 members out of 5 in a Lebanese family. We have almost an amount of 50% of unemployment today. Just like to say we are in a dynamic of decrease, not a dynamic of increase. Just today, also the government also released that the increase in gasoline will be more than 30%. Definitely, this is going to impact the unemployment rate, the food prices, and other resources as well. At this point, given the fact that we have insecurity increasing by the day, we have usages of small arms light weapon every day, we have dead people out of this, the usages of this small arms light weapon on a daily basis. We have inability of families to sustain themselves, inability of families to have medicines, even with the presence of COVID, to have simple Panadol, just like for the temperature of the person to decrease. inability to access hospitals, even when you have the American university hospital saying it might shut down because of the lack of diesel, then we are in real critical and severe crises. In that respect, there are certain calls that we need to do and we need to do together. But I'll give back now the floor to Nada to give it back to Hala, and then we can come up with things that we can work together with. Thank you, Nada, back to you.
Thank you, Shireen. I'm gonna move it quickly to Hala, and we will gather all the questions and we'll try to get to them as time allows. Go ahead, Hala.
Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for having us today. All I can say is I join my voice to Shireen and Nada in talking about the fact that in Lebanon today, we are in a very severe psychological war being waged on us as a population. Every day we wake up to devastating news. So we have been struggling, talk about intersectionality of issues. We have had, like everyone else, the COVID crisis, but on top of that, we are having the economic crisis that you all heard about. And every day we're bombarded by news of inflated prices in our energy resources and medicine. We are threatened that hospitals are going to stop functioning. We are living really a very tough daily life, and we are the voice of those who are in relative privilege. People who are poor, the refugees, women, children are of course much more vulnerable than others. And to answer Barbara's question about the refugees, like all poor and vulnerable populations, they are of course at risk more than others in such crises. There is a big amount of scapegoating. Often they are taken as scapegoats, especially with misconceptions running around about them having access to resources more than others, which is not necessarily true. It's not factual. There is a lot of talk about them taking jobs or taking more aid and attention in the international community. But this is, of course, not true. These people live in some of the poorest areas in the country. There is, of course, a lot of, in terms of pressure on the Lebanese resources, having a sudden, a sudden burst of population in the country. This is, of course, a big issue. And what we need is, more international aid and attention that focuses on poor and vulnerable people, refugees and host communities, to relieve the pressure on resources, to try to resettle these refugees in countries that are more equipped to protect them. So we are, of course, in a situation where what we heard in Afghanistan is very similar of what we experience here. Often the funds and the finances that come to a country, though that you might see the figures as though they are, so big, but very little actually reaches the affected communities. And what we are left with is a lot of NGOs who are active, and a lot of resources. I worked with Mercy Corps myself. A lot of resources actually go back to the financing country in one way or the other through the purchase of equipment that have to be purchased from the US, for example, which are, of course, more expensive than if you source them locally. So yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions, but I just wanted to interject there on the issue of refugees.
Thank you, Hala. If I may add one point also, within the context of Lebanon, it's not only that we have Syrian refugees, but we have also Palestine refugees. If there is an issue of like political processes that ends with a safe return to Syrian refugees, but still when we talk about Palestinian refugees, it means we're talking about the right to return. We're talking about the UN Security Council Resolution 194, and it means something that we need to lobby at larger scales. Now, given the fact that UNRWA's had lots of cuts prior to COVID, the schooling system is also impacted in refugees camps as such. So there are lots of things that are very complicated, very intertwined, and definitely this has an impact not only on refugees per se, but on the social cohesions between refugees themselves and between the host community and refugees. So this is something that we need to tackle as much. And one more point that was raised by Matthew and Hala regarding fundings. It's not only that the local community receive a very, very small amount of money to pursue their projects, but the thing is that these projects are based, for example, on a 6-month basis or 2 years basis. And once you're working on issues regarding peace building without a long-term project, then definitely it's not going to have an impact, especially when the donor has it the evaluation is photos or a report. We're talking about lives, and refugee lives matters, host communities lives matters. We're living in a conflict. I mean, for me and definitely for Hala, we're just 2 days apart. We are both Geminis, so we are the same age. We have lived our childhood just trying to escape bombs. I still remember it. And the day before yesterday, there was Israeli warplanes just firing, using Lebanese skies to bombard Damascus from Lebanon. We heard this, and we had this panic, and we have this fear. So it's not over. So we're talking about work that needs to be done collectively, that needs to be done with the long term, that needs to work on the root causes of this conflict. And this is definitely that has to see and look at what are the priorities of the local communities in a state that is very dynamic. Our priority today is very much different from yesterday because our challenges are very different. We wake up, just imagine, I think yesterday I was in the call, but without my camera. Why? Because I didn't have electricity. It was dark. We wake up with no water. So even if I have a meeting, I need to have water to take a shower and then to come to the meeting. I might not have battery for my laptop to do the meeting. Instead of working on our issues, we have many challenges to look at, and this has to be taken into account as well. That's why I'm very happy to be in that space, because this is, after all, what is it to be a WILPFer? I have the problem, but we collectively do have the solution. Back to you, Nada.
Shireen, what you're saying is food to the soul, really. And I know I connect with you. I know most of us connect with you that we live in Lebanon or lived in Lebanon at some point, and we hang on to this because this is our window to the world. I have a couple of questions. One of them is actually talks about the barriers, internal or external, to getting the resources to the people. I'm going to start with you, Shireen, if you don't mind. So what barriers do you see getting the resources to the people on the ground?
So we're talking about definitely financial, we're talking about knowledge, we're talking about capacity building. I would say maybe there are lots of challenges, but still there are lots of opportunities. I don't want to look at the challenges. Let's look at this space in terms of opportunities. The opportunities that we have is that we are at the ground. We know lots of people that are, especially like in the within the revolution, you have seen how people have seen and have looked towards the state building. So we need to see these kind of people. We need to see also the refugee communities, and we need to see like what kind of work we can do together. And I think this is the most important resource. It's the human resource that we have. Second, maybe I would like to say, I would want to say that one of the things that we have been suffering with is that one barrier is the hope. I think it's hope, because sometimes we don't have even hope, like what is the tomorrow? Is it like, sometimes I even think, is it enough to think of a tomorrow or to work with things with a long-term strategy? I mean, this is an obstacle. This is an obstacle if I'm working alone. That's why, like, collectively, I think is something that we need to be working at.
Shireen, thank you. On that momentum, Hala, how effective and how efficient the NGOs are? A question also. And another one that kind of relate to that is, how can WILPF help and other organizations? So now we hear a lot on NGO. There's a lot of NGOs. They work on many venues and avenues, and but we don't know how this funds is actually is dispersed. So how effective is that, having too many? And directly, let's move. Let's not waste time, because this is a window of opportunity for us, and I would like that to be clear on how can we help. So Hala, can you take that? And
yeah, sure. So I tried to answer in the chat. We've seen, there's a variety of NGOs. Some of them are, of course, more effective than others. UN agencies, some of them are very politicized. So I think that for us in WILPF, would be good is to have focused discussions on what we can do. I mean, it's not an answer in a webinar such as this that could solve the problem. I think we should have discussions the situation is very complex. There are many needs. Like, for example, medication. We don't find a lot of medication. There's an airline company, Air France, just now is helping with their stewardesses to transport medication to Lebanon. So there are a lot of things that we can do together, a lot of projects that we can do together. But I think what we need to do is follow up this discussion with a more focused discussion on what can we do, how can we, basically move the agenda in the US and in Lebanon, because there are some things that also we expect from our sisters in the US in terms of advocacy, putting pressure, like, what we heard from Matthew on Afghanistan. There's a lot of things that are the result of US foreign policy. US foreign policy, for example, supports Israel. Israel is constantly violating airspace here, bombarding Lebanon, bombarding Syria, bombarding in Palestine. This creates a lot of tension. It's a whole regional issue that spills over on us in Lebanon. As you know, we have Hezbollah, and the situation is about also cornering Hezbollah, and so we as a population are held hostage because of that. So there are, if we want to really work properly on this, I think there's a certain level of advocacy that WILPF can do within the US, and at the same time, we can develop small projects together in order to relieve some of the vulnerable people, women and children suffering from this crisis.
thank you, Hala. This question is so important. I don't want to forget to read it, and then we can move on to the issues of investigation and corruption also. So who controls the money supply, and why the inflation? Who is profiting by the inflation? And is there an alternative financial structure or possible? This is such a big subject for Lebanese that we live it. But Alan, I'm going to give it to both of our panelists. See who would like to tackle that first quickly. Go ahead, Shuri.
Okay. I don't have the answer, definitely, but I would like to tell you how complicated it is. So our dollar is at a rate of 1,500, but lately now we have another rate, which is 3,900. You get your money from the bank, your dollar money from the bank at a rate of 3,900. You get your medicine at a rate of 13,000. You get your now gasoline at a rate of 8,000, but still you get it from the black market at a rate of more than that. So we had the dollar. So you have dollar, you know the dollar, but now we have the dollar, which is the equivalent of what the central bank wants to have for Lebanese people from the banks. But last week we have the dollar. Would you know what is the dollar? Dollar is how much you get the gallon of gasoline in the black market. So this is a very much corrupted system that I'm definitely unable to understand it. The difference between the central bank's monetary fund, like how it is set with the banking system. But what I will tell you is that people lost their money. Like if you have worked all your life to get money so that you can have a decent life, people lost their money. Everybody now is poor because you're also you have a certain amount of money that you're able to get out from your bank account, which is not even you can't even sustain it, because now, according to today's analysis, most probably you need around 5 million Lebanese lira for a very basic needs. And definitely you need more than 5 million, and this is definitely something families cannot afford. And there is no policies, at least no long-term strategy on how we are able to help healthcare. Maybe I will leave it to Hala, because Hala also has a diploma in nursing. Let Hala tell you about the healthcare system, and you will see that the public and the private sector, it's something that we are fighting for daily. So it's very complicated when we talk about money, when you talk about economy, because Lebanon did not pay its requirements with the Eurobonds, and definitely this put Lebanon at marginalization in terms of the International Monetary Fund.
Before we move to Hala, I've been told that time is up. We need to wrap it quickly, but I feel every time we discuss Lebanon, we leave it so vague and so big that we need to narrow down and have a plan, have a follow-up plan. I think we all have been talking about this. We don't mean to put all this on you. I know you can all go after this Congress and research everything, read, watch videos, and educate yourself and read, find your resources and not. But I'm gonna let Hala wrap it up quickly with the question on the finances, value of the finances in Lebanon. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'll try to wrap it up quickly. Basically, I think Alan asked the question. As I said in the chat, we have been victim of sort of a Ponzi scheme manufactured by the central bank. So basically, the bank took our deposits and offered it for a budget that is a state budget that is controlled by very, very corrupt politicians. So basically, the Lebanese have lost their deposits. How can we replace that? What we need to do now is form a government in order for this government to start negotiations with the IMF, International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, in order to find solutions and legal legal ways for capital control. We are held hostage by a political class who does not want to be held accountable, who does not want necessarily these solutions. They have all transferred their money to foreign accounts before the crisis started. So basically, it is me, Shireen, people like us who have, all the Lebanese have fallen victim, whereas the politicians are still unscathed. What can we do? Well, I think in terms of our level, we need to share tactics and ways on how to, get rid of this political class. Really, the Lebanese have been tired. They have been trying, but we really need the energy to help us build tactics in order to get rid of this political class from within our country, because it's controlling the judiciary. Nothing can be done. They are now not allowing the government to form. And yes, so we have to find a way in order for the people to go back to power, and people solidarity from across borders is very important. So we need the solidarity of the American people, of people in other countries, as the people, to keep standing and to keep resisting. Thank you.
I think I've been told by Darian to wrap it up. I want to thank you all. Thank you. This is a never-ending conversation, unfortunately for us, for Lebanese, for Lebanon. This hurts so much. And I invite you all to please read, and let's follow up. Let's see what we can do here as WILPFers. I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for being with us. And we put some links here and for the video, and let's communicate.